Okay, as vice chair, I'm going to call this, hey mates, the AdHoc Electric Committee to order at 7 o'clock, August 7th. This is our third meeting. And you know, I can't remember, but I think we should do the pledge, right?
Sure.
Don't we do the pledge? I think we do pledges for all the things that happen in this week. So, Jim, you want to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see, so we can do a quick roll call. Kelly, do you want to do that, or?
Sure. See that? Kaluza,
here.
Draper, here. Testamarna, here. Casagrande,
She's on the phone.
Hatfield's here. Paquette,
Here.
Stuffer,
Resigns.
Dunham,
Here.
and McCracken.
Here.
Okay, now, when is our presentation coming? They're
I
coming?
told Mike that it would be around 7:15, 7:20.
Okay, we can just go until he gets here, and then when he gets here, we can pause.
Any citizens' comments?
Yes, let's go to citizens' comments. Go ahead.
Thank you, Tim McDonald, Seward, Alaska, inside city limits. Do you mind if I stand? Okay, I'm hyperactive, so I don't like to sit down. It seems to me, you know, I'm not as involved as most of you are, but everybody's concerned. You know, this is the only thing worse than losing your utilities is having your child kidnapped. So this is pretty serious business for all of us, because we live here, we've lived here for a long time. And we're jumping the gun, and of course, we're redoing the vote 6 months after we did the first one, which nobody really thinks is right. But the main thing, getting all that aside and anything, what are the answers? Well, the biggest problem is cost, right on top of that, and then, you know, personnel, etc. But it's cost. But my concern has always been is no matter what option that's being presented we take, we're still transmitting that power 80 to 150 miles over electrical lines, you know, either from Bradley Lake or wherever Chugach comes from and stuff. And so we're always vulnerable to natural disasters, and we proved that. And I think we have a lot of options. This is not something that'll work right now, but we have a lot of others, and I want you guys to see this. This is a micro nuclear reactor. This is about 10 feet long, 4 feet diameter, and it has no moving parts. It's the safest nuclear reactor that's ever been built. Westinghouse built it. They're the top nuclear reactor people. And Randy, Skip, anybody else want to go? Anyway, so this would cover 90% of everybody in the utility, 90% of our power needs. It only gets refueled, it's at least 8 years, then they come, take it away, plug in a new one, and they take that one back and refuel it and refurbish it. And it's not cooled, there's no coolant in it, there's no coolant pumps. It's cooled by radiant, it radiates cooling. The heat comes out in all the special tubes, which have a tiny bit of sodium salts in it just to facilitate it, but they're not full and there's not a lot of fluid in it, no pumps, nothing. And it radiates the heat out of it, and then you harvest the heat also off it. It produces heat and electricity. And, you know, this is coming online in 2025. It's not even available yet. But if we had this, just theoretically, it would cover 90% of the utility's power requirements. We continue to buy the other 10% from Chugach, and then when we get our storage capacity up, we wouldn't even need to buy that. And the storage capacity would be in the form of sandbanks. mines, the bunkers that are in Iron Mountain filled with sand. Sand is the best store of radiant heat, and it's a new thing that's been actually viable for thousands of years. But, you know, the Narrows out the bay right there, I don't know how many of you know about that or you go out on boats, but it's a eighth of a mile wide gap between Fox Island and the mainland, Cape Resurrection, or the start of the heel of Cape Resurrection. And that kind of ventures the water on the tides, and there's enough water on either side of it on the south end where you can use they're kind of like a Ferris wheel. They only do 2 or 3 revolutions a minute, but they're heavy. It's the flywheel principle. You know, on an engine, you have a heavy flywheel and the inertia, etc. So we have many options if we don't get in a hurry and give it away. And this should be done through a co-op of the users. They need to sell the utility to a co-op for $1, and we'd be on our own.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yes.
Anybody else? Citizen comments? You sure? Okay. All right, now, I have the list of things that we discussed last week as our agenda. So what we have on the agenda, I'm just going to read the whole thing. Discuss where we can go to find information on each of the deliverables. And then it says, although Montgomery has done extensive research on on each of these deliverables, council would like the committee to come up with their own research. Then we're going to have a presentation, and we're going to discuss the packet we received last week with questions or what the important pages are, etc. We're going to discuss our next meeting agenda, and we'll have citizen comments and committee comments again at the end. So I guess we can start until our presenter arrives with the first item, which would be to discuss where we can go to find the additional information on each deliverable. Who wants to kick it off?
Well, I mean, I'll just jump in quickly on the, if you look at the org chart that was proposed and you look at the different positions, I would say a good place to start would be the Alaska Power Association. Crystal Inkfist and Michael Rovito are 2 good contacts for the APA.
Can you say? Yeah.
Crystal Inkfist
And
Michael Rovito. All right.
we need to contact information for them.
I'll be glad to send that out to you. And then, you know, the other way that we've always done research is just sit down and pick up the phone and start making calls. One thing we talked about at the last meeting as a comparable to Seward is the Copper Valley Electric. It's probably one of the more comparable ones to Seward. So I sent out to you all earlier this week, or last week, excuse me, some information on the top. Looks like 4 salaries for executives at Copper Valley, along with, it looks like they have somewhere around 30 employees. So I believe you got that in the email that I sent. So that's one that's done.
Right.
for
And that's also in this printout here that we have.
Right after you sent that to me, I just did a quick Google and was able to pull up all their employees, all their, I don't know if it had all their salaries.
No, it did not.
But it had the job description.
Right.
and
It had the top
I think
executives.
they had 35 or 36 employees.
Yeah, it was like 34 at the time.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was a good place to start. And then again, I would just reach out to APA and I'll send that information out to you.
Right, and so just to recap, because there was a little bit of conversation we had prior to the start of the meeting. Copper Valley has a much larger geographic area that it serves, right?
Right.
In terms of square miles.
Right.
But they only have about 500 more meters than we do.
Correct.
So that's why it's a comparable.
Comparable. one difference, and we talked a little bit at the last meeting, is our connection to the rail belt. Now, while Copper Valley is not necessarily considered a rail belt utility, they are connected to the larger grid. So from that perspective, it is a little more comparable. It's harder to compare Seward to places that are, what's called in the industry islanded or separated from the grid.
Well, they are islanded. Copper Valley is.
They are islanded?
They are not connected to,
Okay, good.
not to Fairbanks or to Glen Allen.
Good.
There's about 90 miles of conductor missing.
So they're producing their own power though?
They do.
Islanded
Okay,
system.
so they're not buying power from Shoe
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so there's a little apple orange there.
They have diesel, hydro, and gas turbines.
Okay. What do you need?
And those two folks are really easy to find. I've already located
Oh.
their information online.
Who is that?
Crystal
Copper.
and Mike, I
Oh, okay.
already have that,
Good.
so send that to everybody.
Yeah, great.
And I looked up Nome in that same website deal. They are a municipally owned, unregulated, comparable sized community. They're self-generating. They're actually working with an integrated wind farm. And the Nome Joint Utility actually manages the water and sewer department as well as the electric. And they just listed 12 employees
Okay.
as an example of another utility of comparable size.
How
municipally owned,
how many
unregulated.
meters?
Don't know.
Which one was that, Phil?
No,
No.
I thought I sent an email out. I don't know if you got past Ritzy or not.
I would see,
But, no, go ahead. Sorry.
well, I would just say, without knowing the meters, we're still, I really like
Meter
the.
reading.
Well, and also keep in mind, we talked about it last week, one thing that separates Seward and makes us different is we're connected to the rail belt.
Right.
The rail belt serves 80% of the population of the state of Alaska. We are a partner in Bradley Lake. We are a part of the Rail Belt Reliability Council, a meeting which I sat in on today for 2.5 hours. These are big organizations. When I say big, they make big decisions on behalf of the rail belt, and those decisions affect Seward and what we do here with our utility. And we absolutely should be sitting at that table, and that's again where some of our resources we need some assistance with. I know Phil said at the last meeting, we don't need a fancy utility with all these positions. Well, you need a utility that can function. You need a utility that can effectively serve your community. You need a utility that can do the basic services of being an electric utility. We can sit here and pretend that that's what we're doing, but we're not. So if we want to get down to business, then let's get down to business. I'm in there every single day. I know what goes on every single day. And so we can sit here and say, oh, we don't need extra positions. We don't need a fancy utility. And I call BS on it. So.
The point of order, about sharing information, is my understanding we're supposed to send everything to Chris Peck and he sends it out to everyone? Like I can't share this website I just looked up with everybody, I have to send it to Chris and he sends it?
I think that a workaround is you can send it to everybody if you BCC them instead of, so we're not so if we hit reply, it's only going to come back to you. We're not going to start a chain discussion in the email,
Okay.
right? So I think, and then the fourth person that replies to you, you have to say, I can't talk to you about that.
Okay.
Right? So I think if you just blind what?
Could I suggest that we, on this first item of getting everybody's, all the other companies' salaries, how about if we just start a sheet and everybody can bring as much information as they can and let's start compiling a single sheet, but we'll have to do it through Chris Peck, I'm pretty
Right.
sure, okay?
Right.
But let's try to do that before the next meeting, that any of those salaries that you can come up with and the positions, let's get them to Chris.
So we'll work on
Kevin,
Rob's.
one suggestion for the APA, the people there are very busy, so if you guys could funnel everything through one person maybe, as far as contacting me.
Yeah, what I was gonna suggest was if there's a list of organizations to reach out to, that we sign up. Somebody says, okay, I'll be the contact for Alaska Power. I'll be the contact for Copper Valley.
Sure.
So that we're not duplicating our efforts and stepping on each other's toes and making a lot of noise in Alaska over this. I don't know how that sounds to everybody else, but that would be my suggestion.
I'll take EPA. Should
Okay,
we start doing this now?
why not?
Okay.
Is our speaker on hold?
Okay, and Phil, you've got the known stuff, is that right?
Yeah, well, and it was just that same website that listed employees, and I have no idea how accurate that is, or up to date, or anything. but-
I think,
I have Golden Valley Electric Association's sites that they advertise.
Very cool, we'll just leave it up there.
Golden or Copper?
Golden.
And what we talking, Copper?
Golden Valley Association, yeah, and I can actually forward that to Chris Peck.
Oh, I forwarded it to
Or-
somebody. Was that you?
You forwarded
Okay.
it to me, and
Yeah, I
you got
think,
it too? Yeah. Okay.
I do think we need to clarify with the clerk's office if it's admin we should be going through or if it's the clerk that we should be going through. Because I don't know that the
Good.
clerk
What's that?
has in their budget the
Column right there.
time
Here, go ahead.
to,
We need to figure out some way of
I
getting
know.
all the data in one
I'll
package.
share a Google sheet and then drop
well,
it.
that's what I'm thinking. I was wondering if we could do a Google sheet on a Google Drive so we could all just go in and dump the data as we're collecting it.
It's Chrissy, if I could just
Yes,
interject.
Yes,
My
please.
concern would be violating Open Meetings Act. So I think until the clerk says that they can't filter and disseminate information for us, we should all just be sending it to Chris and asking him to send it to the body and don't ever reply to those emails.
okay,
I agree.
okay.
Send this to
It
Chris.
seems like you're just gathering information, putting it on a Google sheet.
Yeah,
and then
Rissy,
that
in
would
terms of
be
the
a
Google
discussion.
spreadsheet, that would be okay though,
We should
right?
definitely check and
Yeah.
make sure, but it seems like that would not be a
Right.
discussion.
I
It's
should
just
ask Chris.
highlight.
I
Okay,
feel like it's like you're walking the fine line and it always seems like you're better off.
I'll send you an email.
Same
Send Chris an email. Yeah.
About 5 minutes away, so we just, Okay. All right, good deal.
okay, so we're going to check with Chris on a Google spreadsheet.
Thank you.
I'm doing that right now.
Okay. And Lori's taking Alaska Power.
I'll take Golden Valley.
Okay,
I'll take no.
good. And then what about Copper Valley? Do we need that or do we already have all that data?
What did you guys oversee?
You got four.
Salaries with
Oh, the
the
salary.
4 positions that
Right.
you gave us.
Yeah.
lower.
Okay.
The other ones don't show on there.
I don't know if that's something we would ask for.
Yeah, okay, I'll try and track that down.
It's a co-op or something. Similar.
Okay, what about, are there any other utilities you think that we should?
I mean, it's tough because we're not quite like the
Anything.
real small ones
Right.
and we're connected to the larger grid.
Right.
It makes it difficult.
Right, right. Yeah, and are there any other communities that only purchase power from Chugach or someone else?
Yeah. I know Chugach, we're the only buyer.
Matanuska and Homer used to buy
Yeah.
all their power from Chugach,
Right.
except Bradley Lake.
But they pulled out.
And 2013 and 2014, they pulled away.
Yep. So right now, we're the only wholesale buyer for
Right, we're
Chugach.
the Apple, okay.
Madam Vice
Yes.
Chair, what about that Alaska Power telephone? They do eastern Alaska and quite a little bit of southeast.
Sure.
I don't know if they're big enough for meter counts. They go with their rural, they have all the problems with people spread out.
And that's different from the Alaska Power that Lori's gonna do?
That's an association, this is a power company.
Okay.
Power and telephone.
Do you wanna sign up for that one?
Did be enough.
I was out doing Golden Valley, I
You
guess
are?
I got enough hours in the internet.
Okay. All right.
I'll trade you for Golden Valley. I know people there.
Here you go, you already got one.
Well, you have one, yeah. But I could definitely do that, so.
Did you pick up on that, Landon? We did some horse trading?
Okay, so,
I know him. But that's McCracken.
I worked there 16 years, so.
We might have a crew.
Which one do you have now, Jim?
Alaska Power and Telephone,
Okay, thank you.
maybe southeast and eastern Alaska.
I guess I just wonder if we should be looking at, what the total revenues are, to compare utilities, and if one, revenues are 4 times ours.
Now, what's the common denominator? Number of meters?
I don't,
Number of
That's the
miles
thing I
wired,
understand.
Number of employees? What would our common denominator when we individually look at these information?
Meters.
Meters. Meters
I
is
think
what
I'd
makes
go for
sense.
total sales myself.
Well, if you look at total sales, what ends up happening is, if a community has like a huge power, consumer, it's gonna skew the numbers,
Put
whereas,
an asterisk by it.
Correct. Number of meters typically, like I said, what makes it tough is there are small utilities out there that would have similar meters than ours, but they're not connected to the railroad.
right.
There's your caveat.
We're covering 8 little villages.
Except for the trees.
Yeah, should we go ahead and transition to our presentation? Is everybody-
Yeah, just real quick though, before we get into the
Okay.
presentation, I passed out documents before the meeting. The first one, if you look at the AdHoc committee questions, August 7th, those were questions that Rissy had forwarded me last week. And as you can see, I'm providing a calendar as well that I printed out. And then the answer to her questions, why is it important for us to have a seat on these committees? Just because we are a part of the rail belt. We are a part owner of the Bradley Lake project. We also have a binding commitment to being a part of the Rail Belt Reliability Council. As part of that, big decisions are made that affect all the utilities in Alaska and then the rail belt as well. So being a part of those conversations and help direct and steer and make decisions that are in the best interest of the rail belt as well as Seward is vital. It's also the information sharing, the relationship building. Through those relationships, I can pick up the phone and call these different utilities, call the trade associations, and I can get support, whether it's from an engineering standpoint, whether it's from a training standpoint, and I can get any kind of assistance that I need through these relationships. It's important that we play. And the groups that I sit on at the highest level, and then there are working groups underneath that. The position that I have in the org chart that I know Rissy was asking questions about is the government relations and rail belt relations position. That's the position that would participate on the working groups. If you look at the calendar, you look at the yellow highlighted sections, those are the meetings that I would have this position participating in. Now, right now, the strike team or the strategic team meets every week. We're looking to go to a 2-week schedule, but we are producing a lot of materials. We're doing a lot of the work on grant applications. We work closely with the governor's office. So being part of the rail belt comes with responsibility, whether we like it or not. So from that standpoint, on the question number 4, he asked what buildings are currently not metered that should be. I talked to a couple of our linemen. We've got one here in the room with us, Jason. We're not aware, and our people do the meter reading quite often. We're not aware of any buildings that are not metered. Not sure where that's coming from. I'm not sure if Rissy, if you want to elaborate more on what you're talking about, but we're not aware of any that are not metered that should be.
There was a meter behind Public Works. So there's a meter facing south on Public Works on the building, but there's a pole back behind Public Works. I know at one point that was metered, it was spinning, but nobody was reading it. And I'm sure a lot has changed since we've changed over from the, the new meters that Kodiak gave us. So things are a lot different now, but I am also unaware of where the meter is for all the streetlights aside from 3rd Avenue.
The streetlights on 3rd Avenue are paid for by the state of Alaska.
Yeah, everything except for 3rd Avenue. I am aware of the meters for 3rd Avenue.
The streetlights that are in the residential areas that are in people's yards and stuff like that, those are, people are billed, I think it's like $5 a month or something like that, whatever the tariff says, that those people will pay that on their power bills. I'm sure there's a couple stragglers out there that we don't know of, but it's, the loss on that is minute, and it's not really a big deal.
Okay, so to clarify, looking at 4th Avenue and all the streetlights that are on 4th Avenue, are those each then tied to a business somehow?
The decorative lights?
Yeah.
Like downtown?
Yeah.
So those are, I believe they're metered off this building, to be honest with you, because the load center is just right here. And that's where you turn all the lights on all the way up the street to Alaska, maybe? And then it goes on to a different circuit.
So the 4th Avenue streetlights could be the meter box that's out in the front yard of City Hall.
Right by the police station.
Yeah. And then just to clarify for people listening, what you're saying, Jason, is that the rest of the streetlights that you would see around town, wherever there might be a streetlight, it's being billed to the people that streetlight serves? So is it multiple residences that are paying $5 a month, or
like in the alleys and stuff they are, but I mean there's some lights that are, like I'm sure like there's a light at the boat launch at the harbor. I'm sure that's not metered. I mean there's just stragglers around town that aren't metered. It's just
Anybody can get one, and it's an awesome deal. I had one on each side of the property at the shop, and I paid the light on each of them because that area is really dark, and it was a good deal.
Yeah, there's probably, just a guess, like 20 to 25 lights that are just lighting up streets that are just being fed by the power system that aren't metered. But I mean, that's part of the service that the city, to light up the town. I mean,
right.
You can't put a meter on one street light. I mean,
so the point of that question was our line, or what you're calling line losses, but it's the system losses are up as high as 9.9% in 2018 and 9.3% last year, which is almost double the national average. Is that correct?
5 to 6% on national last time I looked.
If we have how much, $1 million revenue a month?
Yeah, no more than that.
So if you're talking 10%, that's $100,000 a month. So wouldn't it be worth putting about $50,000 into a study to find out where these losses are occurring?
Yeah, I've got no problem, just like with streetlights, doing an audit. I mean, we did an audit, not quite 2 years, about a year and a half ago, where we had customers that were in small general that should have been in large general, we had some in large general, that should have been in small general.
So anyway, the point would be, our committee should make a recommendation to the city that they absolutely need to do a system losses study and find out where the excess losses are coming from.
I think part of the
We're
issue
going
is
to-
that there's not enough staffing resources to do that.
But if you're losing that much money every month, you can take $50,000 and hire
Hire someone.
somebody to find out.
Absolutely, absolutely. It would pay for itself in the
And
end.
Burlingame could tell you who could do that. Actually,
Yeah, there's a lot of-
EPS,
we've got a lot of
EPC may be able
resources.
to do it.
Yeah, I can make calls to a lot of people.
I mean, you could drive around and flag, you know, which lights are not metered. I mean, that's probably pretty easy to do.
But the lights, I think the lights, aren't they almost all newer lights so that they're not the old
There's still a bunch of
sodiums and stuff?
There's still a bunch of sodium. There's no more mercury vapors out there, but there's a lot of sodium.
Okay.
Sodium vapor.
But you are changing them out to,
Now, there's
lights
no
are-
plan in place to change them out.
oh, really? Okay.
Whenever any go dead, I understand they replace them with
Correct.
the upgraded ones.
When the lights go bad,
Yeah.
not the bulbs.
Okay, so we've come up with at least one, if not two recommendations to give to council outside of our deliverables. Are you comfortable now going into the presentation? Or is there
absolutely.
still something on this list you wanted
Sure.
to touch on?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
And Mike Hubbard, he is our rates consultant. He's with the financial engineering company. We're in the process of going through a rate study now. We should have the rate study completed by the end of August with a plan to present to city council in September. Mike, are you on?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
All right, I've got the clicker for your slides, and I got it on the title slide. Did you want to make any comments? I know you've worked with the city of Seward, I think, Mike, if I recall correctly, going back to 2008, in some capacity as far as being a part of rate studies in the past. Is that correct?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Okay.
For those of you that don't know me there, I'm Mike Hubbard. I have a financial engineering company. I do rate work, power supply analyses for utilities. I live in Maine now, but from 1984 to 2002, I lived in Anchorage and worked with many of the utilities in Alaska, and still continue to do that, although I'm trying to retire.
But I won't let you.
So I won't let you.
All righty, sir, well, your title slide is up. Just let me know when you're ready.
Okay, let's go ahead to slide number 2. What I'm going to do tonight is just give you kind of a real quick overview of cost of service studies, why we do them, and how they're performed. You may look at a utility, you may look at your own utility, and you look at each rate class has a different rate, and you may wonder, well, why in the world do they have different rates, and how did they come up with them? And so, excuse me, tonight I hope to kind of give you just a broad overview of why that is. So if you look at a utility, you can look at the various functions they have. One being, generation, which Seward does not have. They have a little bit of generation, but that's for emergency purposes only. But we have generation, we have transmission, we have distribution, and then we have certain administrative things, customer accounts, and then just the very general admin costs. And what are those? Are they fixed or variable? If you look at those things, some of them might be dependent on the number of customers you have. Some of them might be dependent on the size of the peak load that those customers have. but very few, if any, have to do with energy, how much energy is used. The only one that's really energy dependent is fuel. And so Seward does not have that, except for just emergency purposes. And so most of your costs are fixed. And just to give you a few examples, we look at generation. What are the costs of that? You have the depreciation on your generating assets. You have the interest on the debt. You have maintenance, and then going on down, we look at the transmission. We have the depreciation of the system, interest again, maintenance, and so on and so forth. So if we look at this, we can look at this and we say, well, all of our costs, for the most part, with the exception of fuel and maybe a couple other small things, they're all fixed. And they do not vary by the amount of sales that we have. So if we go to slide 3, the next slide, we assume if we have a utility, and let's just look at 2 maybe large customers. And one customer, and both of those customers have the same demand, peak demand during the month. But one uses kind of a constant amount of energy, and one uses a large amount, just a very small amount of energy. And so that one that's using a large amount of energy that's kind of constant all the time, if you have the same rate for all the customers, that one customer that uses a lot of energy is going to be paying for quite a few of the, or paying for a large portion of the overall cost of the system. Whereas the other one that's using just a little bit, that's causing the same amount of peak demand, they're only going to be paying for a small amount of energy. And we saw in the previous slide that a lot of those costs are dependent on the system demand. And so that one customer that's using just a little bit of the energy, they're not paying for their full share. And the one that's using a large amount of energy is probably paying more than their full share, fair share. So what do we do? Well, what we do is we do what's referred to as a cost of service study. And if we look at the next slide, there is a process that we go through. And the ultimate goal is to make sure that the cost causer is the cost payer. And the process in general is that we take our revenue requirements and then we functionalize those revenue requirements into various functions. And we functionalize them into either generation, are they transmission related, are they distribution related, are they customer accounts, and then we also have the administration and certain other accounts. Then what we do for each function is we classify them. And I'm oversimplifying here because there's a lot of things that we do in between the lines and so on. But for the most part, generation is either classified as energy related, which would be fuel, or it would be demand related, having to do with a coincident peak. And by coincident peak, what I'm referring to there is that it is dependent on the peak of the system. Transmission, the same thing. We build it to meet the peak of the system, and so transmission costs are classified as a coincident peak. Distribution, when we build a distribution system, we're basing it on either the number of customers or their own peak themselves, not the peak of the system, but their own peak. And so that distribution costs are typically classified as either customer related or non-coincident peak related. Then we have customer accounts, which includes billing, meter reading, and so on. And those are dependent on the number of customers you have, and so those are classified based on the number of customers. And then another, we kind of go through a separate process. We allocate it to the other functions based typically on the labor, but there's other things as well, like insurance is based on plant and service and so on and so forth. Once we have all these costs classified, we then allocate them to each rate class. And we allocate them based on their contribution, that rate class's contribution to the classification. Energy is easy. If it's energy related, we look at the number of sales for that customer class and we allocate it based on the number of sales. Customer related is also pretty easy. We allocate it based on the number of customers in each class. But coincident peak and non-coincident peak, we allocate it based on each class's contribution to the system peak, and we allocate it based on their own non-coincident peak, and we have to make some assumptions on that. We have to do some analyses on that, and large utilities do it through a lot of load research, which is very expensive to do. And so what we do for utilities like Seward is that we tag off of other large utilities. And I've testified before the commission on a number of rate studies that have been rate regulated by the commission, and they're fine with that. They understand that it's too expensive to go out and do all this load research yourself. They're fine with us going and using other utilities. And for Seward, what I typically use, we could look at Golden Valley. They've done a lot of load research. We can look at Chugach. We could look at Homer, or we could look at the old municipal light and power in Anchorage. And what I typically use for Seward is the load research that's been done for Anchorage Municipal Light and Power. And yes, they're a lot larger than you, or were, now that they've been swallowed up by Chugach, but they're a condensed utility, and so they're not really all that different, I don't think, from Seward itself. So once we allocate these revenue requirements, we had the revenue requirements we started with, which is typically the budget, and now we've gone through this process, and now we've allocated these revenue requirements to each rate class. Then what we do is we look at the existing rates, and we say, do those rates recover our allocated our allocated revenue requirements? And if they don't, then we tweak the rates to such that the revenues that are going to be collected from that rate class are approximately equal to the allocated revenue requirements. And I say approximately because, as you can see, this is it's not an exact science. So if we are reasonably close, then that's fine. So if we go to the next slide, just to kind of repeat a couple of things I've already said, that under regulation, the RTA, or Regulatory Commission of Alaska, regulates the rates of a number of utilities in the state. And, they regulate Chugach, they regulate Homer, they regulate Golden Valley, they regulate Alaska Power Company. If you're a private utility, a relatively large, privately owned, investor-owned utility, you're going to be rate regulated, and some of the cooperatives are regulated. Most of the cooperatives are regulated, but not all. The commission, if you are rate regulated, you must develop your rates using the NARUC manual, and what that is, it's the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, and they developed a manual for doing this cost of service study, which is kind of what I've summarized. And Seward itself is not regulated, but we do use that process that's in the NARUC manual to make sure that we are being fair, such that the cost causer is the cost payer. And so for the next slide, the final slide, we are doing that cost of service study right now. We're basing it on the 2022-2023 budget, but we are looking forward. We're looking out into the future for a number of years. And we're investigating two separate scenarios. One scenario is bringing the utility up to date and keeping the utility. And what that entails is that there would be staff expansion, there would be an increase in the existing salaries, there would be a number of capital expenditures, and all of this we're looking at, but we're also looking at, well, what's this do to rates? Is it going to, increase rates substantially or what? And then the second scenario that we're looking at is the status quo, and that is with the thought of selling the utility, and that would have a lower revenue requirement. It would not have the staff expansion. It would not have the higher salaries. It would not have the large capital expenditures. But what we're finding is that even without those, we would still have to raise rates pretty much right away. And even if we went down this road and looking at the status quo, and if the utility was not sold now, the status quo scenario could well result in the sale later because, you're not keeping it up to date. You could, you'll have staff turnover, staff vacancies, and so on. And so status quo is, in my mind, is kind of a utility sale at one time or another. So, and I will say that we're getting our numbers together. I'll be providing those to Rob and to the council here fairly soon, and then we hope to bring it all to the council in the next month or so. So there we have it. Are there any questions?
So Mike, just to add on to what you're saying for the sake of the room, I mentioned that we were planning to bring the rate study to City Council in September with the goal of implementing the rate increase October 15th as we have our change on our seasonal rate at that point. So that's when we would be looking to actually make the change in the rate.
And your best guess, about a 15% increase in rates?
We're not.
If you're that close, you must have some kind of idea.
Well, we're getting there, but it's not fair for us to share it with this committee before we share it with council.
Okay, well, we've all heard 15% from time to time, and if that's true, then won't there be about another $750,000 to $900,000 worth of revenue coming in per year?
Yeah, subject to Mike checking numbers, but
yeah, so,
could be. Yeah.
So that's something that will be helping the utility stay solvent right there.
And I guess that's the way I was looking at this process for the ad hoc committee is, if Seward is going to build its own utility and it's a viable option, then, I would say that you need to look at it as, what does that utility look like? Now, I've provided a proposed org chart. Whether you agree with it or not, it's based on my experience of living it. And that, you know, I think the council and myself had hoped that would be a starting point for this ad hoc committee to say the utility director sees these positions as basic need positions. Now, you know, take the rates and take that off the table for the time being. I think what you're doing to look at ways of bringing in revenue and saving money is great. But take the rates out of that and say, you know, has, you know, Montgomery put together an org chart that's enough? I mean, if we're going to build the utility, let's build it right. And let's build a utility that can last and be successful and adequately serve the people. Understand that when you build the utility first is part one. And then I think it's up to the council, based on some of your recommendations with how do you bring in more revenue, how do you save money, but also they have tools in their tool belt that they need to look at. Are they going to do something with the general fund? Or are they going to look at other options that they have for bringing in revenue? I would think the first responsibility of this ad hoc committee is to say, you know, is this enough? Do we need more? Are these adequate resources for us to own our own utility as a city and to adequately serve our community? And then the rates, that's a whole different conversation with the city council. That's my opinion. That's what my impression was going into this process. And that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. And if I could add, I think, you know, Rob's right in the sense that I don't think that I don't think you approach it from the standpoint of, well, if we raise rates by X%, that'll give us this much money and so on. I think you have to approach it from what money do we need to have to make this a viable utility, and then say, okay, what does that do to rates? Because I think if you approach it the other way, where you say, well, if we raise it by X% and so on, that may or may not be enough, and it can easily get swept under the rug, and you know, certain things left out and not addressed. So I think that you have to. I mean, yes, it is circular in the sense that you have to look at the impact on rates and so on, but you know, you should approach it from what do we need to make this a viable option, viable utility.
So, Mike, one question too. You're familiar probably with the wheeling that the other utilities pay each other and the state for pushing power through their lines. So if Homer Electric builds their generators in the middle of Seward's transmission line, if Seward retains the line, they'll be paid a wheeling charge for every megawatt that Homer produces. So that would be another source of revenue for the city. Is that something that you look forward to, since you're looking forward to a few years? Has that been brought up at all?
No, I mean, is Homer's
building a power plant in the middle of the Seward transmission line.
From a Grant Lake?
Yes. And if they acquire the line, they, of course, won't have to pay any wheeling on that line.
Right.
But if Seward retains the line, then Seward will have a source of revenue there for every megawatt produced. So that's just something else for people to look at, that would be a source. I'm sure it would pay more than one person's salary for the year.
Yeah, my initial reaction is that it would not be a huge amount of energy, because a huge amount of revenue. I'm not familiar with what Homer is building there, but
it's a 5 megawatt power plant.
Yeah, so 5 megawatts is not going to produce a lot of energy. And I mean, when you look at their entire system and so on, it's going to be a relatively small amount. And I would, yes, it's revenue that would help things, but it's not going to be, it's not going to be a huge amount. I would not expect.
Phil?
Mike, as we look forward, I guess I'm curious what you think is going to be happening to our demand in sales, given heat pumps that are becoming very popular, EVs, and all the new housing. How are we factoring that into as we look down the road?
Okay, it's a good question, and what we're basing everything on right now is the 2022 sales. And I've looked at the sales from 2012 through 2022, and they've increased in the past couple of years. So we've kind of emerged from the pandemic years, but it's still quite a bit lower than what it has been, say 10 years ago. So in the long term, I think that we're going to probably be seeing an increase in sales, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in the next year or so. But yeah, you're right. I mean, as we go into electrification of many things, we will probably see an increase. But it's like I say, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah,
and speak, I can speak for myself on this one. We have solar on our house, and so we produce power and so on. And we have my wife has a plug-in hybrid. I don't know how many months we were on the wait list to buy that. And, so we may want to have an electric car and EV, but right now they're hard to get.
Yeah. And Mike, one other point to add to what you said for Phil. The rate study that we're doing right now is looking out 3 to 4 years. And then we would probably be coming back for another rate study in that 3 to 4 year time period.
Jim?
Mike, how often should rate studies be done in a small utility like ours?
Well, I typically suggest every 2 to 3 years that it should be looked at. If you want to put in a rate in that it will last for a couple of years, we don't want to be doing this on an annual basis. And so, 2 to 3 years, and then I would say that if nothing really has changed that much on the system, then you may simply just change the revenue requirements divided by energy sales to come up with, an across-the-board rate increase to everybody. But if things are kind of changing, then you need to do the cost of service study where we actually allocate the cost to each rate class, and which is what we're doing now.
I see our last study was the end of 21, is that correct?
Yes, and one of the reasons we're doing the detailed cost of service study on this was because we set up the industrial rate class this last time we did this, and so we're kind of making sure that we're on track with that industrial rate.
And one final question, Mike, for me. What's a normal fee for a study of this size?
Well, if you, I think that the budget for my study here is depends on how many trips I make up for come up for presentations to the council, but I typically charge $40,000 to $50,000 for these things, or maybe sometimes a little bit less. But I can tell you, and I'm not, bragging or anything, and I'm not looking for additional work, because like I say, I'm trying to retire. But if you use a national firm to do this, it would be close to $100,000 or more.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Mike, on this one, we were looking at a little over 50, and that was including 2 trips to Seward with lodging.
Yeah. But I definitely can tell you that other firms will charge a lot more, but I don't.
Yeah, and to that point, Mike, you're right. When you told me you were retiring and I first started talking to other firms, they were much higher. So I was glad that you came back.
Does anybody in the audience have any questions for Mike while he's on the phone? And anybody else on the dais?
Mike, you know, that the simple calculation that you're talking about doing, just looking at, you know, the revenue and total sales. I mean, when I did that in my head, it was like, okay, we're selling, you know, 55 million kilowatts, and obviously our big expense now is going to be that bond payment. And, you know, so we're looking at $750,000 a year more we have to cough up for that bond payment, divided by 55 million kilowatts is like 1.3 cents. So if we spread 1.3 cents across all the ratepayers, we would be generating that 750 grand. Is that kind of in the ballpark?
Well, it's not just the bond payment that you have, and you know, there's you know, that's the interest on it, and then you have the depreciation, which has to be covered, and you know, even if we didn't do anything else, there's inflation has really impacted utilities, everybody, over the last couple, 3 years. And so it's not just that. There's a number of other things that are impacting the revenue requirements. And so I would say that it's going to be higher than that, even with a sell the utility scenario.
Yeah, Mike, to that point, just to give them an idea, you know, each year going into the spring construction season here in Alaska, you know, we typically are ordering wire and poles and different related hardware for our construction activities, our new services. And what we saw coming out of the pandemic is our cost for those same materials went up almost 3 times. So when you're dealing with that kind of inflation in your numbers, there's a huge impact even if everything else stays status quo.
Bill?
Yeah, I guess my only point with Mike is, you know, as our little group and we're looking at adding people and salaries and stuff, you know, we all like to equate it to something simple, like what is that going to cost us per kilowatt? And decide, you know, so I was just wondering if for us to use that simple exercise would be keeping us in the ballpark as we...
Phil, and let me, you know, I have no problem talking to council once we have some numbers that I'm comfortable with. And once, whether we do it in a council meeting or wherever, as long as I feel like they're informed and they're okay, I have no problem bringing those numbers back and sharing them with this group.
Well, it's pretty much absolutely we need them.
Understood. I'm just saying.
That's right in our mission statement.
But you can understand too, Kevin, you can understand, I can't get ahead of my boss, I can't get ahead of the council, and I can't get ahead of the
No, but they actually said in our mission statement that we
Understood.
need that data.
Yeah.
Okay, I got a question for Mike. I'm looking at a list of the revenues from electrical revenues from 2014 through 2022. They're pretty much absolutely flat until 21. It jumped up 4.9% year over year, and then they get another 9.1% in 2022. So you're telling me that I need to go back further to like 13, 12, 11 to see that those were higher revenue years?
Correct.
Haven't gone that far enough?
Yeah, and I'm not sure what revenues you're looking at, if those are total revenues, or which includes the cost of purchase power from True Dash. Those need to be stripped out because that can go up and down based on Chubetch's fuel costs and their rates and so on.
Do you know well enough to know if this 55 last year was?
That's it. Yeah.
That's the one I should be
Hang on, like,
2013 was that year?
12.
I believe it dropped the year
And then you
that
see
the
this is
disability
the
pulled out.
sales here in 2012.
I think you're right,
Where they are
Lucy.
today.
That's when it dropped.
Yeah,
So we can
yeah.
go all the way back there, disability's not coming back, so.
True.
We need to look at
Right,
the realistic, it's not like that we just lost a big user.
right.
Correct.
But the truth is, in the last couple of years, we've had significant increases.
Coming out of the pandemic, we'll see how that goes. We're still not to where we were in 2013, 2012, 2013.
Okay, Skip has a
Yeah,
question.
what I'm looking at right now is that your total sales are approximately the same as, say, they're very close to what they were in 2015. And the highest, 2012, from 2012 to 2022, 2012 was the highest. And then it gradually drifted down. Say 2012 was 58 million kilowatt hours, and I'm rounding here. And it drifted down to 53 million in 2016, 2017. And then in 2018 and 19 we're around, and 2020 we're around 52 million. And you're now back up to about 55, which is comparable to the 2014, 2015 time period.
I have a question for the room. I wish Daryl was here. Could the dip be explained by what the Sea Life Center did in terms of heat pump installations?
It's a little bit, yes, I think. Although heat pumps wouldn't that use more electric? Because they're getting off of fuel.
Yeah, I don't know. I just looking at the year and wondering, I'm looking at the year and trying to think of what happened.
Well, there was a lot of light bulbs changed. Our previous utility manager noted all this efficiency upgrades that went on in the mid-teens and stuff. Actually, we kept dipping it down.
That decade,
So
Okay.
I think we've kind of bottomed out on what we can do. That's why we're seeing us kind of going back up.
Skip?
Mike, thanks for your presentation today. I looked through your 2021 study, and I'm just trying to understand kind of a nit in your process to identify. We've got what's called a transfer fund to the city general fund, a little over $2 million. You mentioned depreciation that's in your study. Just curious, can you clarify if the general fund transfer is part of your cash flow out of the utility, or is it excluded from your analysis?
That $2 million is included in the analysis, that is a expenditure by the utility to the city, so it is recovered through rates. There are two components. One is the tilt, and one is the administrative fee. And how it's set, I don't know.
Yeah, the city has a formula, finance department, that they use for setting those, Mike. I'm not sure what that formula is, but they have a formula.
The payment in lieu of taxes, the tilt is set at 8%, I think, or 6%, or a percentage of the total revenue. But again, how they came up with that percentage, I do not know.
Thank you.
So Mike, on the first slide, it made this statement that most expenses are fixed and they don't vary with sales. So can you relate that to the number of meters? I mean, at some point, I would think that it has to, that the number of meters has to somehow impact your bottom line, doesn't it?
It does to some extent. Excuse me. What we look at, like distribution. Yes, if you have a new subdivision go in or whatever, then you're going to have to build a new, expand your distribution system. And, excuse me, but once that is built, it is a fixed cost and it is not dependent on how many customers there are. It is a fixed cost. Yes, if you put in more, if you have more customers, or if those customers are using more energy, the rate that you need to recover will drop down, but the dollar amount will remain relatively fixed.
Okay, I just really think that that's something that everybody needs to understand, is that the expenses are fixed and they don't vary much with sales. Because I think there's a temptation to keep coming back to, oh, let's raise the rate, or let's, make an adjustment here or there, but we're basically talking about a house that has to be fixed so that it's airtight or, watertight and working, that you can use it. And how much you're going to get out of it once you rent it is irrelevant at this moment. So I'm saying this more for the public and who may be listening later or whatever, that it really is, we have to get these numbers. We just have to get these numbers. Because we got this size house and we got to fix it so that it works.
Yeah, I would say, Linda, through the years, that in particular the last several years, the rates for Seward have been artificially low because we have not put the money in the maintenance that we should have during many years. So playing catch up, and what Phil said earlier, the bond that we had to take out, the $10 million bond, we start making those payments on the principal in 2024. I think it's in the neighborhood of 900, give or take a little bit, either way. And so, regardless of whether we rebuild whatever we do, there's going to be an increase.
Right.
That's where we're headed. The rebuilding of the utility is just another step, but again, I would recommend just not putting all your focus on rates, because I think building a utility that can serve this community is what your mission and what your goal is, right? And I've tried to provide that starting point. And when I said last week, let's don't take shortcuts with this. I mean it, because that's what I see. And unfortunately, that's what I've seen the city do in the past. And here's a chance to, if you're going to keep the utility, build it the way it needs to be built. And let's worry about the other part of this and bring in the council to help make those decisions.
Right. Skip, did you have something?
Just more of an observation or a question for Mike. And while I agree with Rob on a lot of fronts, we've had a lot of discussions regarding a lack of or deferred maintenance aspect of our system, and I think we've seen the investment that we're putting into that. I struggle with the fact that when you say our house is burning down, we ran this utility for decades.
I didn't say burning down.
No, okay, the house needs to be fixed.
Right.
But there's the infrastructure portion and there's the operational portion. And I struggle listening to the conversations from professionals whereby we're doing rate studies every 2 years and somebody on the outside, like Mike, are there people that have been in touch with us as a utility? We're not that far out of touch with reality down here, but somebody along the way had to have seen that this thing was kind of going off the rails. Have we ever gotten that direction? I mean, it's nice to hear from Rob, but where is all the professional services that we've received over the decades to tell us, hey, you know, your house kind of needs a new roof, or your house needs another couple of guys, you know? So that's the piece that I can't connect the dots on, Rob. And so while I agree with what you're saying,
Right.
as a community, and living here for 50 years, I'm going, God, was the house really that bad, you know? So
Yeah, well, when I came in the door, Skip, I was here no more than 3 months, when I had a conversation with a gentleman by the name of Jack Anderson, who works for Dave Burlingame, who owns the firm that we consult with on engineering and construction. Dave Burlingame owns the company that's actually doing the refurbishment work at the Fort Raymond substation currently. Jack Anderson was the one that first told me, make sure you drive out Nash Road and take a look at the poles and the lines, and he would start looking at the age of the equipment in the substations. So I did that, and I also talked to our crews. They were some of the first to also tell me the condition that our Nash Road was in, our poles. We had an engineer come into town from another utility who's told us that we had several of our poles on Nash Road that were being held up by the tension of the power lines.
But that's in the past now.
That's in the past. But
So isn't it true that once this project is done, the system, the infrastructure is going to be in very good shape?
Once we wrap up, the transmission system, Kevin, will be in much better shape once we finish the refurbishment of the 3 substations. Yes, our transmission system coming from Moose Pass, which is, you know, into Dave's Creek, it's in pretty darn good shape once we finish these projects, okay? Now, the distribution side of our system, which are the lines and the poles that come into the city and come into the subdivisions, we still have a lot of underground cable that's old, that needs to be replaced. We still have poles and other related hardware in our alleys and other places. Overall, we're in pretty good shape. The big dollar items, as you know, will be on the transmission, the high voltage stuff. So once we finish Nash Road, which we will finish next year, and once we finish the refurbishment of, we're doing Fort Raymond now, we'll do Lawing next, and then we will do the Spring Creek out near SMIC. And it'll either start it next year or do it in 2 years. We're looking at that timetable now. So our high voltage system will be in much better shape, but there's still a tremendous amount of work that has to be done on the distribution side.
And that's really all we are, isn't it? It's distribution.
No, we're generation, transmission, and distribution.
Yeah. And we've made some repairs to a couple of our generators since I've been in the position.
They're in great shape.
They're in great shape.
What they were 10 years ago.
The generators that we run, while older, we don't run them a ton, so it's like a car that you're not putting a ton of miles on. So our generators are in great shape. Now, who's to say that in 10 years, there's not a new technology that comes along, and you go, wow, if we can get grants and we can offset that cost and we can produce power cheaper than we can with diesel, and it's cleaner than diesel, why would we not look at going to another technology if it's there? If it's not there, we have a plant that does a tremendous job for this community. That is one of the biggest assets we have here, and the fact that we can provide electricity when we lose it from Chugach to every one of our customers. Our plant can produce 15.6 megawatts, and the peak load that we normally have is somewhere 8.5 to 9 megawatts on a summer day. So that plant is invaluable, and the only way I would ever see that plant being shut down or changed is if there's a new, cleaner technology that we can get that, and help pay for it with grants or otherwise.
Would you see this as a potential?
Nuclear is an option that's coming. I think you're going to
There
see.
isn't a single one in the United States yet.
No,
Yeah, but I'm not gonna see it in my lifetime, but some will.
Well,
Okay, hang on
what
a
I'm
second.
hearing is
I have a question for Mike.
12 to 15 years is what I'm hearing on the nuclear.
Jim, for Mike.
Mike, are you still there?
I am.
Excellent. Mike, it was brought up a minute ago about the $2 million that's taken siphoned off every annually to send to the general fund of the city of Seward. If that, and that's with the current rate structure, which seems to be adequate if you can generate $2 million in clear profit to move out of the electrical department, seems to me. My question is, if some of that was utilized to pay the bills and the bond payment and stuff of that nature, would there need to be a massive 15% utility increase?
It would, it would, if you did away with the entire $2 million transfer, then it would probably do away with much of the increase required. But if you're going to make the utility a going operation and expand the staff and so on and so forth, that's going to be take more than the $2 million, I think. But let me say this: two things. If you divide $1 million by the assumed energy sales of, say, 55 million kilowatt hours, that $1 million equates to about 1.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's just to give you a feel for how much you could save. So let's just say that $1 million is a little less than 2 cents per kilowatt hour. But if you take away that $2 million transferred to the city, they're going to have to get it from something else. And so sewer rates will go up, water rates will go up, taxes will go up. So I'm just saying that you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's got to be made up some other place. And I'm not saying that that's good, that's bad, that's right, that's wrong. But I'm just saying that's the way it is.
So thank you.
also,
Thanks on that, Mike. The follow-up question on that, if I might, if 50% of the meters are outside the city limits of Seward and 50% are inside the city of Seward, that would mean that 50% of the people, the meters outside the city, which generates plus or minus $1 million a year, are dumped into, my choice of words, dumped, into the general fund. Is that correct?
I guess so, yeah.
Thank you.
48%.
not real funny to the people that live outside the city limits, so.
Okay,
That can't vote.
let's take Skip's question now.
I just wanted to clarify my question. We kind of got off tangent where when I was talking about the home, I was referring to the inside of the home, the people in the home. We got kind of distracted. Sorry, I didn't qualify my question. This meeting isn't about the infrastructure. That's being taken care of. And by the way, as a technical point, that capital project that has been on our capital improvement project for $12 million for about 10 years. So between the administration, former directors and council, they knew that $12 million was needed to get spent. So those poles on Nash Road should have got replaced much sooner. We're not going to go there. I'm talking about, the people in the house. And that's really what I'm talking about. Because we've had a crew of people here for decades that seem to run this thing. So it's taken a little time, I think, for folks to just understand, how did we go from, we thought it was working just fine, to now all of a sudden, the wheels on the bus are coming off really quick, So that's the problem, is the gap along the way. And we just haven't had a message along the way that, hey, I think you got to replace the toilet. I think you got to do this, or change this person out or that person out. So it's coming at a pretty fast clip. So it's like it'd be nice to eat the elephant one bite at a time instead of the whole elephant. So thanks.
No, and I agree. If I
Thanks.
had my choice, that's the way I would have handled it, right?
And I will say this, I appreciate our guys in the field. They see the polls, they see this stuff going on, and why that stuff never got done, in the offices or in administration, and those things didn't take a priority. I don't know, but I appreciate what the guys do out there.
If I could add to that, excuse me, I have seen time and time again, and I don't want to blame any particular person or persons about this, but I have seen time and time again where the general manager in place says, we are not going to raise rates under my watch. And they're there for 10, 15 years and they don't raise rates. And when they leave, the person that's taken over has now taken over a utility that is in desperate need of improvements. And again, I'm not casting stones or not pointing the finger at anybody, but you may have a lot of that in the past, in the sense of, well, we don't want to raise rates, we don't want to raise rates, we don't want to raise rates. And, well, eventually it catches up with you.
I had a question for Mike.
Okay, Nate.
Mike, I wanted to go back and understand better what you said about using the MLMP load research for Seward. So, can you explain what you're using it for that we don't have our own data for? And I mean, MLMP doesn't exist anymore, so what are you using now? I'm a little bit confused about this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, what we're trying to do is, let me back up for a second here. We need to make estimates of each class's coincident peak and non-coincident peak. And the coincident peak is, what is that class's peak demand at the time of the system peak demand? And their non-coincident peak is, what is the highest peak demand of that class regardless of the time, regardless of whether or not it's at the time of the system peak or not. And so we need to drill down and look at the various load patterns of your residential customers, the load patterns of your small general service, the load patterns of the harbor, the load patterns of the large general service, and so on. And the way you do that is you go out and you put recording meters on, a sample size and so on. And that's pretty expensive to do. And so what we do is we look at, well, is there a utility that has done all that load research, and can we use that? And MLMP, yes, they are now swallowed up by Chugach, but in the past they have done that load research. And they have come up with load patterns of their residential and small general service and large general service and so on. And so we use that research and we apply it to your customers. And, MLMP was a somewhat compact system, whereas Homer is spread out, Chugach is geographically spread out, Golden Valley is geographically spread out, as well as being, very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer. So, in my mind, MLMP was the best one to use. And I will say that when I used their load research and applied their findings to the Seward system, and I came up with each class's system coincident peak. When I added up the coincident peak for all the classes, and I looked at it over a year, I was within 1% of the actual system peak, monthly system peaks. And so that to me tells me it's reasonable to use.
So you're using, now, how long has NLMP been gone? What are you using data from several years ago and you just keep reusing it every time you do a Seward rate study?
For the last 2 times, yes.
I see. And
there's nothing else to use.
So
And,
there's nothing.
And your load patterns have probably not changed that, and those patterns have not changed that much over the last couple of few years.
Right, so then why are we doing another rate study in the patterns the same? I have more than one question. Like, we don't have, so there's no load study in Kodiak or Unalaska or any other like coastal community that's more equivalent to Seward in terms of industry or anything like that?
The Unalaska, they don't do any of that load research. I mean, like I say, it's very expensive to do. And so for Unalaska, what I've used in the past is just I do it a different way for Unalaska, and I make some assumptions versus class coincidence, but it's not nearly as accurate or as good as what we're doing with NLMP here. And I will say that Unalaska is not rate regulated, so they don't, they can do whatever they want. Same with Kodiak.
And Cordova.
Right, and Cordova, I forget what I used for Cordova. It's been quite a while since I did them.
What else? Valdez?
Yeah, Valdez, Copper Valley would not be applicable to Seward because, again, they're inland and very, very cold during the winter and can be quite hot during the summer. So I just don't think it would be very applicable.
Is Valdez part of that?
Yeah, it's Valdez and Copper Glen Island are combined.
Oh, they're together. Okay.
Yeah, same utility.
So basically, we're going to keep using the old data from LMP because it seems to have matched then and nothing's changed. So, is that right?
Yes, for now, yes. And again, what we're using it for is to allocate certain costs, not all the costs, but certain costs. And so, and like I say, it's come up and it certainly appears to be reasonable. And when I come up with when I'm looking at the total, I'm very, very close to the actual.
Thank you.
Mike, just a quick follow-up. I know that Chugach has been reporting, I think, hourly now in terms of our usage. I don't know if you have access to that data. Did it at least show what Seward's average peak is? Time of day?
I do have excuse me, I don't have the time of days that I write with me here, but I do have that data, yes.
Good.
Okay, anybody else have questions for Mike? Rob?
Question.
Sure.
I mean,
Sure.
So what I gathered at the beginning of the presentation is that we've done a rate study to justify the deliverables in which our company is tasked to bring to council. So the rate study is to justify a larger staff, and it does not justify any future maintenance or maintenance and repairs. Is that correct? I just want to clarify that I had heard that right.
No, Rob, do you want to speak to that, or Mike, who wants to take that?
Either one. No, Rissy, to answer your question, when we looked at the rate study, we look at it from two ways, like Mike said. We look at it from status quo, we're not adding any staffing or other resources. But still, as a part of that, we are looking at the maintenance and the ongoing investments that we need to make in the system from a capital standpoint as well. So the other way that we looked at it is we looked at it from the proposed org chart. And we said, okay, if we added these positions, and based on my calculations, which you guys are going to be looking at yourself, with the salaries and whatnot, we added that, but everything from the status quo stayed the same as far as the maintenance, the projects, and that sort of thing. So yes, all of that is included in the rate study, Rissy.
Do you have any follow-up?
No, I'll get clarification later. I guess I'm just confused why we're doing another rate study, and it'll just be something that will slowly sink in, I think, just hearing the
Because we do
conversation.
them every 2 to 3 years.
But, well, if I could add too, in the sense that Rob has come up with his estimate of what it's going to take to make this an ongoing with adequate staff and so on. He's made his estimate, and I'm basing my rate study on that estimate. And now, I was under the impression, but I wasn't in any of these meetings, but I was under the impression that your committee was going to be looking at, was that estimate good? Was it too high? Was it too low?
Yeah.
Or what?
Yeah, that's not the way the deliverables are worded, but that's basically what we're going to do. Yeah.
I have the advantage of not having seen any of the paperwork.
Okay. Anything else for Mike?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, it's out way after.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks
Appreciate
Mike,
you.
so much. Appreciate your time and,
And a 4-hour time difference.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, go to
Oh,
sleep.
no.
Yeah, well, it's after midnight.
It's 12:30 there? So,
Thank you, Mike, I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Mike. Appreciate it.
Okay. Good night, all.
Night.
Very much.
Yeah, he's gone.
So was that helpful at all for you guys?
I think so.
Very.
Oh shoot, I let him go before. Right before, I don't know if anybody was listening to NPR right before we came in here, but right around 6:30, they had an article on the radio about an Alaskan community, and I'm sure they're a standalone. It's a village or something, and I thought I was going to write the name down and then I forgot. But and they're unregulated. But basically their electric rates went up 400%.
Wow.
And it made it so that people could not afford to pay the rates.
Wow. Now, I know, and I was asked by Bob Barnwell in a council meeting one evening about, how is Seward different than some of the smaller communities and villages. And one thing I should have mentioned in my answer is some of those smaller communities are basically, they benefit from the power cost equalization program. So think of it more of a program or subsidy to help those communities, which we don't qualify here in Seward. So,
Right.
So it helps them with their rates.
Right.
I
But even
think that
still,
was an issue at that village too, that they for some reason lost their PCE. Something bad happened with the paperwork or something.
Right.
there's another unregulated utility on the rail belt. Somebody just texted me. They are not comparable to our system, but they had planned to sell and then changed their mind. Their proceed their process may be of interest or why they decided that. It was the university system in Fairbanks. I don't know how big that is.
Yeah, they're connected, but they can disconnect anytime they want to from Golden Valley Electric.
Get their own cold.
So they are not part of the rail belt. They do not sell power, but they buy power from Golden Valley.
I've got something that's just, I just want to ask Rob. Is it possible to find out what services aren't we doing now? What aren't you saying? You know, we're not running this like a rural utility. What aren't we doing? And what these new positions that you want to add, how will they absorb these things that we're not doing?
Sure.
I mean, I know it sounds really simplistic, but I don't know.
One of the positions that we have open, and I know Becky's mentioned in the past, is what used to be called the Power Operations Supervisor, and I've elevated to a System Operations Manager. So just from that position, that person would be overseeing, all of the operations side of the business, and that's who the linemen and the plant operators would report up through. Now,
Right now, that's you?
Right now, because we don't have that position filled. Now, having said that, and I know Becky, you brought it up in the past.
I was just wondering why it took so long to advertise it. 4 months is a long time, but that's an important position, especially when you planned on resigning.
Understood. But, I could pretty much have guessed that we would not have gotten any applicants based on the pay, and we haven't. So as we looked at this process going into the vote on May 2nd, was there a need to try to fill it if the vote went through? Or if we're going to put in place this proposed org chart, I would rather have a salary that's going to bring a more experienced and qualified person in that role. And why would I go and run out and try to hire for this position, even though we haven't posted? It's not surprising we haven't gotten any applicants. Okay?
Well, it's only been advertised for what, a week or two? But when they ask for more
even
money.
before, Becky, it seems like months before we get somebody to apply. My job is posted with no applicants.
It's
Why?
been posted for how long?
Again,
A week or two?
before, when I came on, it was posted for over 6 months,
Oh.
and no one applied. So I did not seek out this position that I'm in. The city actually approached me about applying. So that's how I ended up in this role. Because I was in the community and they came to me, they had no applicants for the job. So that's one job, and it would be running the operations and helping manage overtime in the different parts of the job. Now, the business operations person,
Where's that on the street? Okay, right here. That's the new business operations.
that would be the business operations manager. That person would be helping oversee some communications that we have done that go out to our customers. What communications that we do come through me. Okay? So to have somebody that's overseeing that, somebody that's overseeing customer relations, so that we have a first line, and I'll triple that down. You have an entry-level person that says CR and comms on that org chart. That would be your frontline person. It's actually drafting communications, posting things on social media, putting stuff on our website, drafting news releases, whatever it may be, and the business manager will be overseeing that process. Those two people will be working together to implement programs, whether it's equal payment billing so that people can pay the same amount each month, whether it's rebates for heat pumps, if we can ever get to a point. We can't do it now because we don't have anyone to administer it, right? So you're looking at program development, you're looking at customer relations. In the past 3 weeks, myself and members of my staff, including Jason, and our field engineer, Corey Bolton, we've been dealing with a number of billing issues. So those are customer complaints coming into our office directly or making calls in. So dealing with those types of things. Those are services that we're having to take on ourselves. The other position on the org chart that would report up through the business manager, and you heard me say last week, it's the cyber and reliability.
That
But
can be outsourced.
yeah, whichever way is going to be more cost effective for the city. If outsourcing is the best way to do it, I'm fine with that.
Still have to budget for it.
But you still have to budget, which is why I have it on the chart. We have to talk about it, right? So that's one of the positions that you're going to have to do simply because of the mandates we're going to have to keep up with. Going back to last week's meeting, I talked to Dustin Phillips, our IT manager. Dustin said he did not think, and he said he'd come to next week's meeting. He had another engagement tonight. But he did not think that they could get it up to speed enough to take it home. But even if they did, he doesn't think they have the capacity with the 3 people in his organization to take it home.
Right.
Don't speak for him. He'll be here next week to address that.
2 weeks.
Or 2 weeks, sorry. 2 weeks.
Yeah.
To address that. So, so a position there, business ops manager. That business ops manager will also get engaged with billing, even though it's being outsourced. We still will have some billing functions here, so that'll have to be managed through the electric. That person would also split some of my duties, or the duties of my position, as far as representing Seward on the rail belt at the BPMC and some of these other organizations. The government relations and railroad relations person, that person is actually in these working groups that you see highlighted on my calendar. So they can work with the other utilities and help with monitor federal legislation, state legislation, help draft grants, help write press releases, reports and white papers for the utility that we can share with the mayor and the city manager and these others. There's a ton of work that comes in at that level that we need help with. But one thing that we've been lacking that and you heard me mention it earlier, programs and services, that would start with that comms, community relations, customer relations position, and work directly with the business manager. Now, another problem that we have with the utility today is succession planning. So, let's say you have somebody in the GM role, this is my role, and that person leaves. Today, there's no one really to move into that position. The people that are in our line crews and plant operators, they're not going to consider our jobs because of the pay. If you go to this proposed org chart, you have 2 options that could move into the general manager's role. That would be the systems operations manager or the business operations manager, based on who's the most qualified at that time. So then you're running your utility and you're not missing a beat, right? You're planning for the future. So
right now we're set up for failure because you're going to go away. They're not on the books to fill your shoes, and
It's not like.
they don't have an engineer right now. Is that what you said?
no,
Well, do they keep it posted everywhere? Or
It's
do they
posted.
just bring it up and
Where
take it
is
down?
it posted?
It's I mean,
well, typically when we post it through the union.
What are we trying to
post
do
it
here?
in the lower 48.
Is this
trades.
posted in the union in the lower 48 or just on our
haven't they just
website?
thrown their hands up and said,
Typically we do
"Hell,
post
let's
it
just sell the
locally."
utility? That's what it's looking to me like. Get the jobs posted. If you're not getting anybody to put in for the jobs, then raise the salary.
Well, that's what we're here to do. That's exactly what we're here to do.
But by the time we get our work done, because our whole meeting's gone already tonight,
Yeah.
before we have a chance to get our work done, the utility's probably gonna be sold in October.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
we're running 2 concurrent roads, right? There's the path to the election, and while they're going in that direction, we're gonna come up with some numbers before October. And
I do have another idea for, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, Linda. For the positions, ask why they post a single wage. Is there a wage scale for the positions? Like, for example, it would be nice to have somebody in a position and advertise it for more, for, like, you don't have an engineer degree, do you?
No.
Okay, so advertise it with or without an engineer degree, 2 different pays, or, and we are gonna have to offer more money, I think, looking at the other.
Maybe when we're calling around and talking to all these people about these positions, ask them how they recruit.
Yeah, good idea, good idea.
Right.
But we need to start recruiting. I mean, how do we know
It
nobody?
should be posted continuously, and the city council should be smart enough, if they're not getting any candidates, to raise this.
Oh, and the finance director position too. That's huge.
Well, it's the whole city. But, I mean, we can't
Hang on
just
a
raise
second.
one position.
Hang on a second. It's also like a 3-legged stool. It's not just the salary. There also has to be a place for them to live when they come here. And there has to be childcare. And we don't have those things. So, let's just stay focused on getting the deliverables.
Well, and you've heard me in meetings, council meetings,
Right.
say exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
Now, in addition to the positions and getting competitive wages, let's say you do all of those things. Are we going to be able to house them? I would love to have good, qualified people to select from. The last place you want to be when you're hiring is feeling desperate. Trust me.
Right. Jim?
Yeah, question. On that proposed org chart, you stated that the business op manager and the system op manager would be the general manager replacement at the general.
Possibly, yeah.
What is the executive administration?
That's the administrative assistant.
Now, wouldn't they be the natural person to move into that slot?
No, it's the board of ed.
That's like an administrator or secretary. And somebody doing paperwork.
You got some fancy titles. Then the rail belt liaison person, but not the executive assistant secretary. Could that not be combined in some fashion?
No.
We worked for 20 years with a volunteer that went to all these meetings, and we did quite well.
The position for the government relations and the rail belt relations, that's more of a true professional college degree, somebody that can write, put together reports, represent the utility in meetings with high-level people in the rail belt, somebody that you could send to represent the utility to Juneau or to Washington, D.C.
Okay,
Go ahead.
well, I'm just looking at the clock. We've got 8 minutes. Are we feeling comfortable that we can wrap up in that time? Do we need to do an extension on time?
I guess if we're gonna get into that, I guess my question is, when are we really gonna dig into this organizational chart?
Well, I think, from what I understand, what we've decided today, we've signed up for various people to gather salary information, which is the first deliverable, and put it into either a Google Doc or send it to Chris to be put into a Google Doc, or Stephen or somebody. And by the time we come back to our next meeting, we'll have all that salary data, and we should be able to start working on this first deliverable, can't we? What more do we need?
Was it salaries and job descriptions?
Yeah, let's see.
If you look at the last meeting, it would be a good
Cost
starting
estimates for
point.
salaries, benefits of the additional personnel as outlined in the org chart.
But I provided a pretty high-level job description that I handed out at the last meeting.
Yes, in this packet here, I think we have a lot of the job
Of
descriptions.
existing jobs.
Yeah.
Do we have job descriptions
For
and
the new
duties for these
positions?
new positions?
They're in there.
Yes, sir, passed them out last minute.
Okay. All right,
Yes, they are in the packet.
yes,
Yeah, the big pack.
the big packet.
Just real quick, there's also 2 people on the other side of the equation added, another lineman and an apprentice.
There's a lineman added. I don't think there's any question we need one more lineman. I could be persuaded to, I don't think we necessarily have to have the apprentice plan ops position. That was a late
You had to pick
add-on.
between the two.
A lineman,
So
absolutely.
if the plant was automated, which at Gold Valley, we had 9 FM at Fairbanks Morris diesels and EMDs, just like yours. We remote started them all the time. The only time we had to have the operator go there is to make sure that everything shut down correctly.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to get us there, right?
So didn't they install most of that equipment to remote start those generators? They did not.
There may be some equipment installed, but we cannot remote start those generators.
So it would just seem to me, that's it, no matter if we sell the utility, that's what Homer or Chugach would do.
Correct.
So
They both said that would be one of the first things.
Seward do that themselves? I mean, and that's another Burlingame question for installation of the controls.
Sure.
I think they did most of the relay work already.
Yeah, you know, I'm fine looking at that. I've gotten great pushback from my plant operators.
Okay, but it's
Take their jobs
a,
away from them. We're trying to save the ratepayers, not their jobs, right?
All right, so.
So it's just, I'm not saying you don't need an operator, but I don't think you need to have.
I agree with you. You still have.
In the future, they will not need to have 2 operators and an apprentice.
Agreed. See, I'm agreeing. All right?
Yeah.
That position was on.
And I know that's a horrible thing to say as a former union person for 29 years.
We'll find another union job.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we've got everybody got their assignments on which utility they're going to get rates from or salaries from. Do we need to go through that again? Lori, you're gonna do Alaska Power. I'm gonna do Copper Valley. Kevin's gonna do Golden Valley. Jim's gonna do Alaska Power and Telephone.
I wonder how
Phil is doing
confidential
no.
most of those salaries are. We're gonna be able
Well,
to
we're gonna
just.
find out.
You can have a personnel manual with a rate, you know, years of service,
Right.
salary, grade, you know, range that they could get without getting a person's salary.
Right, no names, just.
So our next meeting is the 21st. This coming Monday will be a council meeting, which means that admin's going to want the notes from Kelly really like tomorrow before noon.
I've been sending them the work the next morning.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I know, it just doesn't, I don't know whether that'll make the packet. So I'm not sure this meeting's notes will make the packet, but they'll have
Last
last,
on them right now. Will that make the packet?
I don't know, I mean, yes. That
I
would
think
make
it will if
it's in
But we
there by
wouldn't have
tomorrow.
had a chance to, Rissy wouldn't have had a chance to look through them.
I want to make a motion to continue the meeting for 10 more minutes.
Okay, second, is anybody second? Huh?
We're here. I agree.
Okay, is everybody okay with that? All right, seeing no objection, we're gonna keep going.
I thought we were making some recommendations to the council, and we've only got 3 minutes, and we haven't discussed those recommendations further. There was talk about some study.
No, all those recommendations are at the end of, after we finish the deliverables.
I don't, that's not what I understood earlier in the meeting. It was, so what study were you talking about?
Loss study.
Yeah,
Find
thank
out
you.
why we're twice the national average here.
Right. Right.
No, it was my thought that would be part of our presentation with our deliverables and recommendations. That was my understanding.
That's a fairly huge amount of money to lose every year.
I think that, you know, I've heard 3 things over the last 2 meetings that, you know, I think there's been some consensus on that should be pointed out to the council. We're losing money with the line loss. We need to figure out where it is. We've got the power factor thing. I mean, we spent all of last meeting like talking about power factor. I mean, that should be a priority. And then I just hear this remote start business, right? And so these are things that are obviously need to be done. And why are we going to sit and wait months to tell the council we figured out these 3 things need to be worked on?
Well, they're not. They're getting our notes. So if they're reading the notes in the packet, they're right up to speed with what we're talking about. But what they made very clear at the last council meeting is they want their deliverables. And anything else that we want to tell them, we might consider telling them later, but they're really not interested in anything else other than the deliverables right now. That was really made quite clear, I thought. Don't you think, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I think they made that clear, but I also would say that if there are things that you feel like need to be recommended from a cost saving standpoint,
Right.
that type of thing, they would be willing to include that in your report.
Right.
And then they can take it for what it's worth. But I
Right.
would not keep yourselves from doing something that you think is in the best interest of the utility.
So as far as Mike Hubbard, I mean, we were gonna do this for only like 20 minutes, but he ended up being on the phone with us for over an hour. And that's all great, but we have the 2020 rate study.
Sure.
And if they won't give us, by talking to him, he didn't give us a guesstimate of what the new rate is going to show, rate study is going to show. So, it was good, but it didn't really help us in the way of coming up with numbers yet.
No.
But
And
they're not asking us to come up
and
with
we're-
rate numbers.
They're asking us how to make this sewer electric system whole. And
Kevin, to your point, I think we're 10 to 14 days from being comfortable to share numbers. Again, the commitment I made to this group is I will talk to Norm, and if we can get the information out to the council, even if we can do it outside of a normal council meeting, and they're okay with us sharing the information with you guys, we will share it. I mean, we're not keeping it from you. We are making sure we're not getting ahead of the council.
How about the public? Will those be open meetings?
Yeah, I mean, anytime we do a rate study and a rate increase, we come in and we have to present the council in an open meeting. But I'm talking about if we have those numbers before we're planning to present, which we're planning to do the first meeting in September, then, if they're okay with me sharing the information with this group, I will. But that's their choice, not mine.
one other thing is that we talked last meeting about having an agenda by the end of each meeting. So our next agenda, were you going to have another speaker for us at the next meeting? And if so,
It's the 21st.
Yeah.
Planning
we'd
to have
like to try
first.
to limit it, even though Mike Hubbard was very interesting, but I'm not sure it was.
Well, I mean, he went for about 15 to 20 minutes on his presentation, and the rest
And
of it
then we
was
kept it for
Q&A.
questions, so that was on
Yeah, the
us.
Q&A did that.
That was on us, yes.
So Curtis Thayer is set up.
Curtis Thayer,
Yep.
and his function is
He is the executive director of the Alaska Energy Authority.
AEA.
Correct.
And the,
You know Curtis.
and the topic of his talk is going to be,
He's going to be talking about the importance of Bradley Lake to the railroad utilities and the role that Seward plays in that. And he will touch a little bit on the RRC, but not as much. But it's more or less to give everyone here an understanding of the type of commitments we're making as a utility to be a part of that process.
okay. I don't anticipate us having as many questions for him as we do.
He's good, you may.
Well, yeah, but when you look at the deliverables, every single one of them, there's 5 of them, they all start with the word cost.
Right.
So all of our recommendations, all of our suggestions have got to be at the end of our 5 deliverables, if we're doing what council has asked.
Right. Well, and one reason you're hearing from like Hubbard and Curtis there is because when you look at the proposed org chart, I've said before from an operations standpoint, I think we're in good shape. We need one line, okay?
Right.
It's the other side of our utility that we need help. And there's some of that work is driven by what's going on with our engagement with the other utilities.
And these speakers should help make all that clear.
Correct.
Can I ask for clarification on the speaker? Are we limiting it to 10-minute presentations for the next meeting?
20 was it?
Well, we did a 20-minute window. I had asked Mike Hubbard to do a 10-minute presentation and leave 10 minutes for Q&A. I think he went closer to 20 minutes on his presentation, and then the Q&A went much longer.
So I don't see a budget in this packet that we've got so far. Can you give us the previous budget, or is it in this? Have we got the budget that you're working
For
on now?
2023, 24?
The budget you're
That's on the
working on
website.
now?
Yeah,
Yes?
it's on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, that should be
Yeah,
able,
okay.
we could find that in
Right.
legislative history.
I don't mind tracking down some things, but
Okay, and because the cost estimate for additional vehicles, equipment, and all of that stuff should be in your new budget assessment, yes? So a lot of this stuff on deliverables 2 and 3 and 4 should be in the budget, and then we just need to figure out what.
yeah, and look, I'll be honest with you, if you look at the way it's worded with the cost for the equipment and vehicles, I'm not sure that with this proposed org chart, we would need any more vehicles, right? From an office standpoint, then you're looking at computers and office space and that type of thing. But vehicles, do we need one more fleet vehicle? Maybe, I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, we'll get to that when we get to that deliverable. So for next meeting's agenda, we're going to have Curtis as a speaker,
Correct.
and we're going to tackle the first deliverable. Is everybody, are we all in agreement of that? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Rob, your timeline of schedule is kind of set from here through the end of the year. When would it be time to start to increase the salary or the benefit package for your replacement when it's being advertised? I think it would be very prudent to get somebody online so there was some overlap here,
Yeah, no, I agree.
rather than a brain drain.
Right, and that's
If you come
why.
in cold, you understand what it is like coming cold.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a hiring bonus? I fixed that so we didn't have to look at
The
salary.
sooner the better, right? There was no hiring laws.
But it's a constant question.
Right, and that's the type of thing you may want to consider, right?
Yeah.
As a group. It's always, in any circumstance like this, the sooner the better, right?
Yeah.
But, based on the proposal and what the org chart looks like, a lot of that should be determined, I would imagine, but we can't do anything until we know, in my opinion, what the council wants to do. Or are they going to move forward, let's say if there's a vote and it's favorable, or are they going to look at this as the option they want to pursue? And we need to know that before we can really decide.
Well, we're making decisions that reach out further than October.
Oh, yeah.
We're asked to do that. So if we can ask council, they're gonna watch this YouTube. We can ask them, step up the general manager replacement protocol, what they need to do to get something working.
Well, and that's again where the job is posted. But if you look at what the rate is, in my opinion, you're probably not going to get any out.
Hiring bonus,
Okay?
$25,000 hiring bonus, moving something.
But even with that, Jim, in my opinion, if you don't get to the point where the actual salary gets adjusted, you can throw the bonus out there, but there are other utilities throwing bonuses and that type of thing out as
No,
well.
and then you run the risk, I think, of moving somebody to Alaska who wants to come to Alaska, but doesn't necessarily see themselves here long-term, and they're just using it as a stepping stone. I think we really have to be looking at setting rates that are competitive in the industry.
I'm sure we got 2 minutes to
Yeah.
With the city so adamant on selling the utility, nobody's gonna take the job, right?
Yeah.
Right now, I don't think, I agree.
And so we're basically set up for a loss, basically. I don't see any way around it. Does anybody here see a way around it? Because Rob, your contract's up in December, correct?
Correct.
So they'll have to renew your contract if you're willing, and if they don't, if you haven't filled any of the positions, we're flying in the wind.
Kevin, come out of retirement.
How about citizen comments? Do we have any citizen comments out there that want to go on the record before we?
For exactly what you said is, we gotta watch moving somebody here that just wants to see Alaska and then decides this is what they want. That's exactly why I think it's important to advertise these jobs local first. And as soon as we realize they've come up, like the assistant job. And any studies that cost money, that we find out how much it is worth, like the rate study, or any surveys or anything like that, I think are worth it. I mean, look at how much was spent on this last one just on influencing the outcome of an election. So I think that an outside consulting firm that says how much everything is worth might be worth it.
Anybody else? We'll do council comments or, board or whatever we are, committee comments.
Have no comments.
Okay. Really? Kelly?
I just am really appreciative of everyone who's coming here and offering input. It's good to see people participating.
Well, we are body 8 now, recognizing that
We are
it's
body
not
eight.
an optimal
Right.
number of people to have. I would like to consider asking council adding a particular individual with a lot of financial expertise who's put a lot of work into this. I'm going to put him on the spot.
Well, if we remember, it was a council, it was supposed to be a committee of 7 that
Yeah.
seated everybody that applied, so.
We don't seem to be
No more
voting all
attrition.
along.
No more attrition, though. Rob, anything?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate the opportunity to be heard. I know that, it's trying to learn, and I think there are times that, you guys may not agree with either how I've managed the utility or decisions I've made or even my proposed org chart, but I do appreciate the opportunity to come in here and share information and try to at least explain, why things are the way they are and why I've done what I've done.
Thank you.
I think we've had plenty of comments. The only suggestion I would have is I hope certain, or some of the city council members take time to, if they have been watching it, to do it on YouTube. Some of these suggestions that have been coming forward as suggestions should be looked at closely by them to save some money to make this utility more efficient regardless of who owns it.
I guess, I made a little note here, the rail belt position. I guess I need to make it clear that we represent, 1% of the rail belt, right? That's not a whole lot. We represent a little over 1% of the Bradley Lake, which, having our seat at the table, Rob knows I said, I think it's great for little Seward to be this artifact of the rail belt and to still have a say, but we are not the rail belt utilities buying and selling electricity. We are a customer with a backup generator in the shed. And so how much we can afford to invest in our little utility into representing full-blown every rail belt meeting and decision by a paid staff member, I think it's kind of a stretch. And I really think we ought to be thinking about some of those positions. In terms of linemen, I would love to see what the workload is for this additional lineman. We don't need that 5th lineman, maybe we could just have an apprentice lineman. I guess I don't have the information that justifies saying, we need another lineman.
And I'm more than happy to answer questions, whether it's now or you want me to address it at the next meeting.
I mean, is it work orders that we're behind on? I mean, where's the justification for?
A lot of it comes in with flexibility. A lot of it comes in with managing overtime better.
Absolutely. See, I would love to see that going here. We can save this amount in overtime. We can save this here.
Sure.
We've got these projects that this person, that are addition to what the regular crews are. So I feel a little more comfortable telling the council,
Sure.
yep, we see a need for this position.
So do you want to bring that to the next meeting?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll add that to the agenda. Next.
I think it's really important to distinguish between wants and needs. And what do we need to keep our utility running? And what is the extra stuff that we want that would be nice? Like to have someone go to all these big meetings, even though we're the little guy that no one listens to, you know? So I really think that's essential because we are here for the ratepayers to make sure they don't pay more than we need, not what these Cadillac version we want. And I have to go back to the public comment at the beginning of this meeting and just ask, you know, is it really best for the long-term vision of Seward to be this, you know, always buying when we have a lot of natural resources around here, and why can't we somehow develop them? I mean, look what Kodiak did. I mean, they're like, you know, like almost 100% renewable if they're not. And what can we do for the future and not just get, you know, focused in on this little question of staffing, but do we really just want to be always buying, and can we be, you know, off the grid and just buying, like I think you said the University of Alaska has their own system that
They have a coal-fired power plant.
Okay. Well, anyway, yeah. What can we do? What can we do here locally? So when the line goes down, we, you know, other than our generating plant, what else can we do for the vision of this Seward for the next 100 years? I mean, I think we should ask that.
Yeah, I agree. Rissy.
I do not believe I have any comments. I definitely like to see next meeting have a lot more of the committee input and maybe just a more general sense of the committee getting business done. I think we've heard a lot from administration, and obviously we need to hear from administration to get some answers. But I definitely would like to see our next meeting run a lot more with, you know, the committee. I worry a 20-minute presentation with 20-minute question and answer, and then all of us, you know, we've got, I think, 5 utilities to be reported back, that maybe we should just plan on having a 3-hour meeting on the 21st.
Well, then we should start early. I don't really know what to say until 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Maybe start half an hour early.
Anything else, Riss?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right, so on the 21st, we're going to have a presentation from Curtis. We're going to get the justification of the extra alignment on the org chart, which we need because the first deliverable is basically the org chart.
I released the budget numbers. We got the 2-year-old.
I can send some of those out. I actually have some of those that I
You did.
I can't, no, I'll send them to Chris.
Send it to
Send them to
Chris.
Chris and he can
Send them
them
to
out.
Chris, and Chris can then send them
I was
out.
gonna do some graphs, so they'd be fun.
Ooh.
My only comment is, well, not my only comment, but my comments are to thank everybody that has been here. Thank Mike for doing his presentation. Thank you to the citizens who came. Thank you to Becky for streaming it. And I just don't want to have what happened in that Alaska village happen to us. And so I think it's really important to do our due diligence and try to navigate our way through this process that we're in right now. That's it. So I will adjourn the meeting at 9.